And the funny thing is, I started researching because they've had a spike in sales. Cash for clunkers and all that. And a little bit after. Two most popular General Motors vehicles are the Silverado and the new Camaro. Gas guzzlers. In other words, the two most inefficient vehicles they make are the ones people are buying. So it's not the American car buyer that buys American cars. There's a difference between the American car buyer. The American car buyer that buys American cars wants muscle. They want a Camaro with a huge gas-guzzling V8 or a Silverado with a huge gas-guzzling V8. So the only thing that seems to be driving General Motors right now are the cars that the government doesn't want you driving. So if they force these fuel efficiency standards on General Motors and nobody buys their cars, what's going to happen? Or is General Motors just going to become an entitlement program? Is the UAW just going to become a new entitlement program? You'll have Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, welfare, and the UAW. Because if General Motors is too big to fail, but the only cars they're selling are the ones the government doesn't want on the road, and nobody seems to want to buy their smaller fuel-efficient vehicles, then what are they going to produce? If they're told they can't produce Camaros after 2012 or 2013, and that the Silverado is going to have to fall in line with the Prius, then what are these UAW workers going to be producing at General Motors plants? Or are we just going to have we're going to just consider General Motors another make-work program? It doesn't matter what they make. General Motors will maintain its level of employment no matter what. So they lost $1.2 billion, and somehow they're going to manage to pay back $1.2 billion, probably with another government loan of $1.2 billion. The left hand is just paying back the right hand. It's still the taxpayers' money. Doesn't matter how many cars they sell. They're still using government money to repay back the government. Because until General Motors, let's just be honest about this. General Motors is nowhere near profitability. Whatever money they're giving back, they wouldn't be able to even make if they were a truly private sector, and they'd have been out of business. Unless they scaled down to producing simply the cars and trucks that General Motors is known for. Camaros, Blazers, stuff of that nature. General Motors is never going to become Toyota. It's never going to become Honda. They even make that point clear in their commercials. They compare the Honda to the, I don't know what model it is, some Honda to some Chevy, and then Howie Long says, well, there's one thing that we don't produce, and there's a lawnmower there. Well, until they can make one of their cars run on one of those lawnmower engines like Toyota, like Honda, you're right. But what are they expecting? If we're not going to get into a trade war with the Japanese and the Germans and all of the other international car makers, we're not going to get into a trade war through tariffs. And nobody wants to drive these General Motors vehicles minus their SUVs, trucks, and muscle cars, which the government claims we shouldn't be driving. Then what are they going to be driving? What is the American car buyer going to be driving? If the government says to General Motors, well, you're losing money, and by the way, we're not going to let you produce the 3 or 4 models that people actually want to buy when they buy cars, what are they going to do with General Motors? Unless they're just going to make it another entitlement program. 1-866-95-PATRIOT, 1-866-95-PATRIOT. The shifting of money from one account to another account, from one government entity to another government entity, does not provide any window into whether or not General Motors is profitable or ever going to be profitable again. If they're making 12 different models of cars and people are only buying 3 of them, then you've got 2/3 of their workforce, if not more, making stuff that nobody's going to use. And if the federal government forbids General Motors, or the UAW forbids General Motors to lay off unnecessary workers, then the UAW and General Motors has become an entitlement program. If all you need is the workforce to produce the Silverado and the Camaro and maybe the Corvette, 1 or 2 other vehicles, and you've got a whole bunch of stuff rolling off the assembly line that nobody's buying and just sitting on a lot collecting dust, then you're employing people to produce a product that isn't going to be purchased in the free market. And if you aren't going to tariff cars coming in to force people to buy them because you don't want to kick off a trade war, then what you've turned General Motors and the UAW into an entitlement program. It is now a social program. The United Auto Workers are now a social program. If you're guaranteeing employment to people who are producing products that nobody's purchasing, then what is it that they're doing? It's an entitlement program. It's make work. You might as well just have them go outside and dig holes. And on Monday, and then fill them in on Tuesday. 1-866-95-PATRIOT, 1-866-95-PATRIOT. And again, I'm still waiting to see Obama do what past presidents have done. I'm waiting for Obama to sell war bonds. And I don't mean that literally. I'm waiting to see Obama get out and encourage Americans to buy a General Motors vehicle. I would like to see every single well-to-do Democrat turn in their keys to their Mercedes-Benz and their Audis and their BMWs and their Land Rovers and Range Rovers and their Lexuses and Infinities, turn in their keys and buy a Chevy. And I would like to see all the Hollywood A-listers that pledge their support. They'll pledge their support to smile more. They just won't buy a Malibu. Let's see Oprah drive a Malibu. Ashton Kutcher's a pretty cool guy. Hey, I don't think it would hurt his reputation to be seen in a Camaro SS. That's a pretty cool car. It's been around as long as his wife has. I'm talking about the 1967. Actually, I think she's older than the Camaro. I don't think it would hurt the image of any Hollywood A-lister to be seen in a Corvette, but they can't. It's one thing to support the UAW. It's another thing to actually buy their product and be seen in it. How drab. A Malibu? It's a Chevy. I can't be seen in a Chevy. I got to be seen in a Koenigsegg. 1-866-95-PATRIOT. 1-866-95-PATRIOT. So, General Motors is going to pay back a $1.2 billion, make a payment of $1.2 billion while they lost. How do you make when you're losing money? I guess they're running General Motors just the way the federal government runs General Motors. It's just a paper transaction. They're not actually transferring $1.2 billion back to the federal government from profits on sales, because the only money they have in their accounts were given to them by the federal government, and the federal government owns them.